21. Hold that number in your mind for a moment, because it is going to matter more than you might expect. 21 is not a round number. It is not 10 with its tidy sense of completion. It is not 7, the number of rest, and the number every believer reaches for when they want to talk about the perfect work of God. It is not 40, the long span of testing and wilderness and waiting that the scriptures return to again and again. 21 is an odd, unglamorous, almost overlooked number, and yet there is something hidden inside it that speaks directly to what you may be living through right now. 21 is 3 sevens. It is the number of completion multiplied by the number of divine perfection. Completion upon completion, a fullness layered over a fullness. In the book of Daniel, there is a moment where the prophet prays and waits, and the answer does not come for 21 days. 21 days of silence, 21 days of wondering whether heaven had heard him at all, and then the messenger finally arrives and says something extraordinary, that from the very first day Daniel set his heart to understand, his words had been heard, and that the messenger had been dispatched in answer to those words from the very beginning. The silence had never been absence. The silence had been the long, unseen labor of heaven moving on his behalf the entire time. That is what this teaching is about. Because there is a particular kind of silence that many of you are living inside right now. It is the silence of waiting for a person who has not yet arrived. The silence of an empty seat at the table, the silence of watching others pair off and build and move forward while you remain, as far as you can tell, exactly where you were. And in that silence, the question that rises up, quiet but relentless, is this: God, are you doing anything at all? Do you see me? Have you forgotten? Is anything happening, or am I simply being passed over while the years go by? And the answer that the whole of Scripture presses toward, the answer that I want to spend the next stretch of time unfolding for you slowly and carefully, is this: there are 21 silent ways that God prepares you for the right person, and almost every one of them is at work long before you ever start looking, before you have met them, before you know their name. Before there is a face to attach to the longing, the preparation is already underway. The silence is not empty. The silence is the workshop. I want to be careful and honest with you from the very beginning, because this is a tender subject and you deserve truth rather than sentiment. This is not a video that promises you a spouse by a certain date. It is not a formula. It is not a set of steps that, if you perform them correctly, will produce a person on the other end like a vending machine dispensing a reward. God is not a transaction, and love is not a prize for good behavior. What this is, instead, is an unveiling, a pulling back of the curtain on the hidden work that God does in the life of a person who is waiting. The deep, quiet, often invisible shaping that is happening in you right now, whether you can feel it or not, whether you believe it or not. Because here is the truth that the waiting heart most needs to hear. The most important preparation for the right person is not the search for them. It is the work God is doing in you while you wait. The right relationship is never primarily about finding the right person. It is about becoming a person who is ready to love well, ready to be known, ready to give and receive in a way that most people are never prepared for, because they spent all their energy searching and none of it being shaped. And God, who loves you with a love that is older than the foundations of the world, is not wasting your waiting. He is using it, every silent day of it. So if you are tired tonight, if you have grown weary of the question, weary of the hoping, weary of the well-meaning advice and the unanswered prayers and the quiet ache that visits you in the moments between obligations, then I want you to settle in. Let your shoulders come down from around your ears. Let the striving rest for a little while. And let us walk together, slowly and without rushing, through the 21 silent ways that God is preparing you right now, for a love you cannot yet see. Before we go any further into this, I want to pause and speak to you directly, person to person, because what we are about to walk through together is the kind of thing that is better not walked through alone. There is a smaller room inside this larger one. This channel has a membership, a way of stepping a little deeper inside a circle of people who are walking the very same road you are walking. People who know the ache of the empty seat. People who are learning, as you are, to trust God in the silence. When you become a member, you are not making a transaction, you are stepping into belonging. Members receive teachings made only for them, quiet studies and prayers that never go out to the wider public, and they see each new video before anyone else does. If that is something your heart is drawn to, it is simple to do. Tap the join button just beneath this video. Choose whichever tier feels right to you, and you are in. You are part of the inner circle from that moment on. And I want to say this just as sincerely, because it matters more than the invitation itself. There is no pressure here, none at all. If this is not a season where you can give anything to help support this work, that is completely all right. It changes nothing about your place here. Simply being here, simply listening, simply opening your heart to these words tonight already makes you one of us. You already belong. The door is open either way. And as we begin, I would love it if you would do one small thing. Drop a single word in the comments for what you are carrying into this teaching tonight. The one weight you are quietly hoping to set down before we reach the end. Just one word. You may be surprised how much lighter it feels simply to name it, and how many others reply to say they are carrying the very same thing. Now, let us begin. The first silent way. He roots your identity in him before he roots it in anyone else. The very first thing God does, long before there is any person on the horizon, is the thing almost no one notices while it is happening. He goes to work on the foundation. Not the relationship, the foundation underneath the person you are becoming. And the foundation he builds first, the bedrock beneath everything else, is your identity. Who you are, whose you are, what you are worth, not on the open market of human attention and approval, but in the unshakable estimation of the God who made you. This matters more than you can possibly imagine, and it matters first for a reason. Because the single greatest threat to any future relationship is not incompatibility, and it is not distance, and it is not the absence of chemistry. The single greatest threat to any future relationship is two people arriving at it empty, each one secretly hoping the other will finally answer the question they have never been able to answer for themselves. Am I enough? Am I worth loving? Will someone, at last, make me feel like I matter? When you bring that unanswered question into a relationship, you do not bring a partner. You bring a hunger, and no human being, however wonderful, however devoted, however perfectly suited to you, was ever designed to carry the full weight of another person's worth. It is too much. It will crush them. And it will exhaust you, and it will turn what was meant to be a meeting of two whole people into a desperate transaction between two starving ones, each demanding from the other a bread that neither of them possesses. So God, in his wisdom and his mercy, does the deep work first. He spends the silent season, the very season you may be resenting, teaching you to find your worth in him, not as a slogan, not as a verse you can recite while still feeling worthless underneath, but as a lived, settled, bone-deep reality. He wants you to arrive at the right person already full, already secure, already certain of who you are, so that the relationship becomes an overflow of two full lives, rather than a collision of two empty ones. Consider how the scriptures describe what you are to God. You are not an accident of biology. You were knit together in the secret place, formed with intention, every day of your life written in a book before one of them came to be. You are not merely tolerated by God, you are delighted in. There is a passage in the prophet Zephaniah that, when you truly grasp it, can undo years of quiet self-rejection in a single moment. It says that the Lord your God in the midst of you is mighty, that he will save, that he will rejoice over you with joy, that he will rest in his love, that he will joy over you with singing. Read that again and let it land somewhere deeper than your intellect. God sings over you. The being who spoke galaxies into existence, who holds every atom together by the word of his power, who needs nothing and lacks nothing, and is complete in himself from eternity past, that God looks at you and sings. If that is true, and it is true, then your worth was never in question. It was never on the table. It was settled before you were born, and it cannot be unsettled by your singleness, your age, your history, your failures, or the number of years you have spent waiting. The silent work God is doing right now is the work of getting that truth down out of your head and into the deep places of your heart, where the real you actually lives, where the fears are and the wounds are, and the quiet verdict you have passed on yourself for years has been quietly running the show. And here is why this is the first silent way and not the 5th or the 10th, because everything else depends on it. A person who knows their worth in God chooses differently. They are not desperate, so they do not settle. They are not starving, so they do not grab. They are not terrified of being alone, so they do not cling to the wrong person out of fear of the empty seat. The most attractive quality in all the world, though the world rarely names it as such, is a quiet, unhurried security that does not need the other person in order to be whole, but freely chooses them anyway. That security cannot be manufactured in a moment. It is built in silence, over time, by a God who loves you too much to let you walk into your future, still believing the lie that you are not enough. So if you feel God has gone quiet on the subject of your future spouse, consider the possibility that he has not gone quiet at all. He is simply working on something deeper first. He is building the foundation before he raises the house. And a wise builder always tends to the foundation, while the ground above it still looks empty. There is a moment recorded in the Gospels that captures this with unforgettable force. Before Jesus had performed a single miracle, before he had preached a single sermon, before he had done anything at all that the world would count as an achievement, the heavens opened at his baptism, and the voice of the Father declared over him, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Sit with the timing of that. The approval came before the accomplishment. The delight came before the doing. The Father was well pleased with the Son before the Son had given the Father anything to be pleased about in the eyes of the watching world. And if that is how the Father loved the Son, then understand that this is how he is teaching you to receive his love as well. Not as something earned by your performance, not as a wage paid for your spiritual productivity, but as the settled, unearned delight of a Father who loved you before you had done anything at all. This is the foundation that must be laid before any other, and it is the reason God will spend whole seasons on it, while the rest of your life appears to stand still. Because a person who has not received this love, who is still secretly trying to earn their worth, will turn every relationship into a courtroom, forever presenting evidence, forever defending their case, forever anxious about the verdict. But a person who has received the Father's love as a gift can finally stop defending and start living. They can love from a place of security rather than scarcity. They can risk being known because their worth no longer hangs on the other person's response. The silent work of being rooted in his love is the work that frees you to love at all. The second silent way. He heals the wounds you would otherwise pass on. There is a kind of pain that does not stay contained within the person who carries it. It leaks, it spreads, it reaches into the next relationship and the one after that, and it shapes them in ways the wounded person rarely sees and almost never intends. We wound from our wounds. We bleed on people who did not cut us. The hurt that was done to us, if it is not healed, becomes the hurt we do to others, not because we are wicked, but because pain that is not transformed is always, eventually, transmitted. And God knows this about you. He knows about the wound you do not talk about, the thing that happened when you were young that you have never fully named, the betrayal that taught you, at a level below conscious thought, that people leave, that love is unsafe, that the moment you let someone all the way in is the moment you hand them the power to destroy you. He knows about the father who was not there, or who was there but absent, or who was present but cold. He knows about the relationship that ended in a way that left you convinced something was fundamentally wrong with you. He knows about the words spoken over you years ago that you still hear in the quiet, in your own voice now, repeating a verdict someone else handed you when you were too young to refuse it. He knows. And in the silence of your waiting, he is doing the patient, unglamorous, often painful work of healing what would otherwise poison the very thing you are praying for. This is one of the most overlooked reasons that God allows a season of waiting to stretch longer than we want it to, because an unhealed person who finds love does not escape their wounds. They simply bring those wounds into a closer and more inescapable proximity with another human being. The fears come too. The defensive patterns come too. The tendency to test the other person, to push them away to see if they will stay, to read abandonment into ordinary moments, to need constant reassurance because some part of you is still bracing for the betrayal you learned to expect long ago. All of it comes too. Love does not automatically heal these things. Often love simply exposes them, brings them roaring to the surface in the one relationship where you most wanted to be whole. So God, who is not content to give you a relationship in which your old wounds run the show, gets to work on the wounds themselves. Sometimes he does it through the slow passage of time and the quieting of old storms. Sometimes he does it through a community of people who love you steadily until you begin, almost against your will, to believe that love can be safe. Sometimes he does it through his own direct comfort in the night, the strange and specific peace that comes when you finally bring him the memory you have been protecting and let him into the room where it lives. Sometimes he does it through counsel, through wise and trained people who help you trace the pattern back to its root. He uses many instruments, but the surgeon is always the same, and the surgery is always for your good. There is a profound mercy in this that is easy to miss while you are in it. The wound that God heals in you now is a wound you will not pass on later. The cycle that ends in you does not get handed to your future spouse, or to the children you may one day have, or to the relationship you are praying toward with such longing. God is breaking something in the silence, not breaking you, but breaking a chain. He is stopping a thing that has been traveling down through your life, and perhaps through generations before you, and he is stopping it here, in you, in this quiet season that feels so much like nothing is happening. The psalmist wrote that God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds, and in the very next breath he wrote that God counts the number of the stars and calls them all by name. The two thoughts sit side by side on purpose. The God who manages the unimaginable scale of the cosmos is the same God who bends down to the small, specific, hidden injury in your heart and tends to it with the gentlest possible hands. Your wound is not too small for his attention, and it is not too large for his healing. And the binding up that is happening now, in the silence, is part of how he is preparing you to love and be loved without the old pain contaminating everything it touches. So do not despise the slowness. Some healings cannot be rushed without being ruined. The work he is doing in you now is a gift to a person you have not yet met, and an even greater gift to you. There is a particular lie that wounded people carry, and the silent season is often where God finally exposes it. The lie says, "The wound is who you are." It whispers that the thing that happened to you defined you, marked you permanently, set the ceiling on what your life and your love can ever be. And so the wounded person walks through life braced, guarded, certain that they are damaged goods, certain that anyone who truly knew them would turn away. But God speaks a different word over the wounded heart. He says that you are not your wound. He says that the thing done to you does not get the final say over who you become. He says that He is in the business of taking exactly what was broken and making of it something whole, and sometimes something stronger in the broken places than it ever was before. This is not a denial of the wound, it is its redemption. God does not pretend the injury never happened. He does something far greater. He takes the very place of the injury and makes it over time a place of ministry, so that the comfort you receive in your healing becomes a comfort you can one day offer to another, and the compassion forged in your own suffering becomes a gift you bring into every relationship you will ever have. The most tender, most understanding, most genuinely compassionate people are almost never those who have never suffered. They are those who have suffered and been healed, and who carry in their healed wounds a softness toward the suffering of others that the unwounded simply do not possess. God is making you that kind of person in the silence. The wound, surrendered to Him, is becoming the very source of a deeper capacity to love. The third silent way. He teaches you to be content before He gives you more. There is a sentence the Apostle Paul wrote from a prison cell that has the power to reframe your entire experience of waiting, if you will let it. He wrote, "I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content." And the word he chose, the word behind our English word content, carried the sense of self-sufficiency, not in the sense of needing no one, but in the sense of carrying within oneself, by the grace of God, a settledness that the outer circumstances cannot reach. Notice the crucial word, learned. He did not say he was born content. He did not say contentment descended on him in a single dramatic moment of spiritual breakthrough. He said he learned it, which means there was a process, a curriculum, a series of lessons, many of which were almost certainly unwelcome at the time. Contentment is not a temperament that some lucky people are issued at birth. It is a skill, forged in exactly the kind of season you may be resenting right now, and here is why God will so often teach you contentment before He gives you more. Because a person who cannot be content without the thing they are waiting for will not be content once they have it. This is one of the most quietly devastating truths about the human heart, and it is worth sitting with. We tell ourselves that our restlessness is about the absence of the specific thing, the spouse, the relationship, the person who will finally complete the picture. But restlessness is rarely about the thing. Restlessness is a condition of the heart, and a discontented heart does not become content by acquisition. It simply attaches its discontentment to the next absence, the next lack, the next thing it does not yet have. You have surely seen this. You have seen people who got the very thing you are praying for and remained as restless as they ever were. They married and then found something else to ache for. They got the relationship and then began to quietly resent it because the relationship could not do what only contentment can do, which is to still the deep, ceaseless hunger of a heart that has never learned to rest in God alone. A spouse cannot make you content. A spouse can only join you in the contentment you have already learned, or be slowly worn down by the discontentment you never resolved. So God, in His kindness, does not skip this lesson. He will not hand you more while you are still convinced that more is the answer to a problem that more cannot solve. He loves you too much to feed a hunger that would only grow more demanding the more it was fed. Instead, He uses the silence to teach you the deepest secret of the satisfied life, that he himself is the portion, the treasure, the spring of living water that does not run dry. He uses the very emptiness of the empty seat to teach you to find your fullness in him, so that when and if he fills that seat, you receive the person as a gift rather than seizing them as a fix. Picture two people walking into a relationship. The first arrives starving, certain that this person is the bread that will finally end the hunger. The second arrives already fed at the table of God's presence, bringing not a desperate need, but a glad and grateful overflow. The first relationship begins with pressure, with expectation, with a weight no human can bear. The second begins with freedom, with delight, with the lightness of two people who are not trying to extract life from each other, because they have each already found it elsewhere. God is teaching you, in the silence, to be the second kind of person. And that lesson, though it is hard, is one of the greatest gifts he could possibly give you before he gives you anyone else. Learn contentment now, in the waiting, and you will carry it into everything that comes after. Refuse to learn it now, and no relationship on earth will ever be able to give you what only this quiet, costly, irreplaceable lesson can. There is a further dimension to this that the longing heart needs to hear. The contentment God teaches in the waiting is not resignation. It is not the grim acceptance of a disappointing fate, the dull surrender of someone who has given up hoping. True contentment is something far richer and far more alive than that. It is the deep, settled gladness of a soul that has found its treasure, and therefore no longer lives at the mercy of its circumstances. Paul did not say he had learned to grit his teeth and endure. He said he had learned to be content, to carry within himself a fullness that the prison could not empty and the chains could not steal. That is not resignation. That is freedom. The freedom of a person whose joy is anchored in something that no external circumstance can reach. And this freedom is one of the most attractive and life-giving things a person can possess, though it is rarely recognized as such. We imagine that what draws people is beauty or charm or success or any of the things the world prizes. But there is something far deeper that draws the right kind of person, and that is the quiet radiance of a soul at rest. A person who is not grasping, not desperate, not trying to extract life from everyone they meet, but who carries within them a settledness that makes others feel, somehow, more at peace simply for being near them. That contentment cannot be faked, and it cannot be acquired quickly. It is forged in exactly the kind of season you are in, and when it is finally yours, you will carry it into every room you enter, including, one day, the room where you meet the person you have been waiting for. The fourth silent way. He refines your desires until you want the right things. Not every desire that rises up within us deserves to be trusted. This is one of the harder truths of the spiritual life, and it runs directly against the grain of everything the surrounding culture tells us. We are taught, from every direction, to follow our hearts, as though the heart were a reliable compass that always points true, as though every longing that surfaces within us were a message from our deepest and truest self. But the scriptures are far more honest and far more useful about the human heart than the culture is. They tell us that the heart is deceptive, that it can want things that would destroy it, that it can be drawn with great force toward exactly the wrong things, while feeling, in the moment, entirely certain that it is right. And so, one of the silent, hidden works that God does in the season of waiting is the slow refinement of your desires. He is not content merely to give you what you want. He loves you too much for that, because what you want is not always what is good for you, and a God who simply granted every desire would be not a loving father, but a dangerous enabler. Instead, he goes deeper. He works on the wanting itself. He reaches down into the place where your desires are formed, and he begins patiently to reorder them, to dim the appeal of what would harm you and to awaken a hunger for what would truly satisfy. Think honestly about who you were drawn to 5 years ago or 10. For many people, there is a particular and humbling realization waiting here. The kind of person you found magnetic in an earlier season, if you are honest, was often exactly the kind of person who would have been wrong for you. We are drawn, in our immaturity, to things that glitter rather than things that endure. We are drawn to intensity and mistake it for love. We are drawn to the unavailable and mistake the chase for passion. We are drawn to people who reflect back to us our own brokenness, who confirm the lies we already believe about ourselves, who feel like home precisely because they recreate the very dysfunction we should be running from. The heart, untrained, reaches for the familiar even when the familiar is the thing that wounded it. God knows this. And rather than simply handing you the person your untrained heart is currently reaching for, he takes the time to retrain the reaching. He uses the disappointments. Yes, even the relationships that did not work out, even the ones that ended in pain, as part of the curriculum. Every wrong turn surrendered to him becomes a lesson in discernment. You begin to notice what you did not notice before. You begin to feel somewhere in your spirit a check, a hesitation, a quiet unease around the kind of person who once would have swept you off your feet. And you begin to feel something new awakening, an attraction to character, to steadiness, to kindness, to faithfulness, to the unglamorous and durable qualities that the younger version of you would have overlooked entirely as boring. That shift is not an accident. That shift is God refining your desires. There is a verse that is often quoted as though it were a promise that God will give you whatever you want. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. But read closely. The verse is doing something far more profound than that. When you delight yourself in the Lord, when you draw near, when you let his presence become your joy, he does not merely grant your existing desires. He gives you new ones. He authors the desires themselves. He plants in your heart, as you delight in him, the very wants that he intends to fulfill, so that by the time the fulfillment comes, you are no longer wanting the wrong thing and calling it love. Your wanting itself has been redeemed. So if you have noticed over this season of waiting that what you are looking for has begun to change, that you find yourself less impressed by the things that used to dazzle you and more drawn to depth, to integrity, to a quiet and faithful goodness, do not dismiss it as merely growing older or growing cynical. It may be the fingerprint of God on your very desires, refining them in the silence, so that when the right person comes, you will actually recognize them as right, instead of overlooking them in favor of someone who glitters and wounds. There is a tender warning folded into this, and it is worth receiving honestly. The desires we refuse to surrender to God are the desires most likely to lead us astray, because an unsurrendered desire is a desire that answers to no one but itself, and a desire that answers to no one but itself will eventually demand to be fed at any cost. But a desire surrendered to God is a desire he is free to shape, to redirect, to purify, and ultimately to fulfill in a way far better than we could have arranged for ourselves. The surrender is not the death of desire. It is the redemption of it. When you lay your longing for a relationship at God's feet and say, in effect, not my will but yours, you are not killing the desire. You are handing it to the one who can refine it into something worth fulfilling and then fulfill it in his own perfect way. And here is the quiet miracle of surrendered desire. God often gives back, transformed, the very longing we laid down. The thing surrendered is not lost. It is purified and returned. No longer an idol demanding to be served, but a clean desire that he himself authored and now delights to satisfy. The person who has surrendered their longing for a relationship does not end up without longing. They end up with a longing that has been cleansed of its desperation, its idolatry, and its distortion, a longing they can now hold before God with open hands, trusting Him to fulfill it in the way and at the time that His perfect wisdom appoints. That is the fruit of refined desire, not the absence of wanting, but the redemption of it. The fifth silent way. He builds your patience through the waiting itself. There is a strange and almost circular truth at the heart of the waiting season, and once you see it, the whole experience begins to make a different kind of sense. The waiting is not merely the obstacle between you and the thing you want. The waiting is itself one of the primary instruments God is using to prepare you. The thing you are enduring is the thing that is shaping you. The very experience you are trying to escape is the classroom you most need to be in. Patience is not built in comfort. It cannot be. Patience, by its very nature, can only be forged in the experience of waiting for something you do not yet have. You cannot learn to wait well in a life where everything arrives the moment you want it. You cannot develop endurance in a season with nothing to endure. The fruit of patience grows only in the soil of delay. And so the delay you are living through, far from being evidence that God has forgotten you, may be the very evidence that He is at work, cultivating in you a strength of character that simply cannot be grown any other way. The scriptures speak about this with a clarity that can be almost startling because it runs so directly against our instinct to flee from difficulty. The Apostle James writes that we are to count it all joy when we fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of our faith produces patience. And then he adds something crucial. Let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Lacking nothing, that is the goal. Not lacking the spouse, not lacking the relationship, but lacking nothing in the depths of your character. Being whole, complete, mature. The kind of person who is ready for whatever God places into their hands. And the road to that wholeness runs directly through patience, and patience runs directly through exactly the kind of waiting you are in. Consider what an impatient person brings into a relationship, and you will begin to see the mercy in this. An impatient person rushes. They force things that should be allowed to unfold. They mistake a slow, healthy, properly paced building of trust for a problem to be solved, and in their hurry, they damage the very thing they are trying to build. An impatient person cannot tolerate the ordinary frictions of two lives merging, because patience is precisely the capacity to endure those frictions without panicking, without fleeing, without demanding that everything be resolved immediately. An impatient person, given a relationship, often destroys it. Not through malice, but through the simple inability to let things take the time that good things take. And so God, who intends to give you not just a relationship, but a relationship that lasts, knows that He must first give you patience. He cannot place a slow-growing, deeply rooted love into the hands of a person who has never learned to wait, any more than a wise gardener would hand a priceless and delicate seedling to a child who pulls plants up by the roots to check whether they are growing. The patience must come first, and the only place patience can be grown is in the waiting, so the waiting is not wasted. Read that again, slowly, because the waiting heart needs to hear it more than almost anything else. The waiting is not wasted. Every day of it is depositing something into you that you will need, something that cannot be acquired any other way, something that will one day make you a better partner, a steadier presence, a person capable of the kind of long, faithful, enduring love that the rushed and the impatient never manage to build. The God who is making you wait is the same God who is using the wait to make you. And on the day you understand that fully, the waiting itself will begin to feel less like a punishment and more like what it has secretly been all along, a gift. Consider, too, what the long view reveals about the nature of God's gifts. The things that come quickly are rarely the things that last. The relationships built in haste, the loves that flared up overnight and demanded everything immediately, tend to burn out as fast as they ignited because nothing was given time to take root. But the things God builds slowly, the loves He allows to develop over patient seasons, put down roots deep enough to survive every storm. A tree that grows quickly is weak-wooded and falls in the first strong wind. A tree that grows slowly, ring by patient ring, becomes the kind that stands for generations. God is growing something slow in you, and the slowness is not a defect in His care. It is the very signature of His intention to build something that will last. And so the patience you are learning is not merely a virtue for its own sake. It is a kind of trust expressed in the language of time. To wait patiently is to declare, with your endurance rather than your words, that you believe God's timing is better than your own, that you trust Him to know when the moment is full, that you would rather have His best slowly than your own substitute quickly. Every patient day is a sermon preached to your own heart about the goodness and the wisdom of God. And the person who has preached that sermon to themselves day after day through a long and difficult waiting emerges with a faith and a steadiness that the impatient never acquire, a steadiness that will be a quiet strength in every season of the life still to come. The sixth silent way. He develops your capacity to love selflessly. There is a question that almost no one asks while they are searching for love, and yet it is perhaps the most important question of all. We ask endlessly whether we have found the right person. We ask whether they are out there, whether we will recognize them, whether they will choose us. But we rarely stop to ask the question that determines everything. Have I become a person who is actually capable of love? Not capable of falling in love, which requires nothing but the right chemistry and a willing heart. Capable of love itself, the daily, deliberate, costly, self-emptying thing that real love turns out to be once the first rush has faded and the ordinary years begin. Because here is what no one tells you in the season of longing. Love, the real and lasting kind, is not primarily a feeling. It is a practice. It is 1,000 small acts of putting another person ahead of yourself, over and over, on the days you feel like it, and on the far more numerous days you do not. It is patience when you are tired. It is kindness when you have been wronged. It is the choice to stay soft when everything in you wants to harden, to listen when you would rather be heard, to serve when you would rather be served, to forgive when you have every right to hold the grievance. And that capacity, the muscle of selfless love, is not something you suddenly possess the moment you meet the right person. It is something that must be built slowly, often painfully, long before they ever arrive. This is one of the most overlooked works that God does in the silent season. He is building in you the capacity to love. And He does it remarkably through the very relationships you already have, the ones that feel like they have nothing to do with romance at all. The difficult family member who requires patience you did not know you had. The friend who is going through something long and draining, who needs you to show up again and again with no reward, but the showing up itself. The community that asks you to serve in ways that are inconvenient and unglamorous. The neighbor, the co-worker, the stranger, every one of them is, without knowing it, a training ground where God is developing in you the exact capacity you will one day need to love a spouse well. The famous passage on love, the one read at nearly every wedding, was not written about weddings at all. It was written to a fractured, quarreling, deeply ordinary community of believers who were struggling to get along. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not easily provoked, thinks no evil. Read that list slowly and notice something. Not a single item on it is a feeling. Every one of them is a choice, a discipline, a way of treating another person regardless of how you feel. And every one of them can be practiced right now in your current life with the people already in front of you, long before the person you are waiting for ever appears. So God uses your present relationships to prepare you for your future one. The patience you are learning with a frustrating relative is patience you will one day bring to a marriage. The forgiveness you are practicing with a friend who let you down is forgiveness you will one day need in far greater measure. The selflessness you are developing as you serve people who can never repay you is the very selflessness that will make you one day the kind of spouse who loves not in order to receive, but simply in order to give. None of it is wasted. All of it is preparation. And there is a quiet challenge in this, one worth receiving honestly. If you find that you cannot love the people God has already placed in your life, if you are impatient with them, unforgiving toward them, unwilling to be inconvenienced for them, then the absence of a romantic relationship is not your real problem, and its arrival would not be your real solution. The capacity for love is built in the soil of the relationships you already have. Tend that soil now. Learn to love the people in front of you, and you will find that God has been using them all along to prepare you for the person who is still to come. The seventh silent way. He strips away the idols you have made of relationships. There is a subtle and dangerous thing that can happen in the heart of a person who waits a long time for love, and it happens so gradually that they almost never notice it occurring. The longing, left untended, slowly hardens into something more than longing. The desire becomes a demand. The hope becomes a requirement, and the relationship you are waiting for quietly climbs up onto a throne in your heart that was never meant for it, until, without ever deciding to, you have made an idol of the very thing you are praying for. An idol is not only a statue of stone or wood. An idol is anything we look to for the life, the meaning, the worth, and the security that only God can give. An idol is the thing we tell ourselves we cannot be happy without. It is the thing that occupies our first thoughts in the morning and our last thoughts at night. It is the thing we are quietly convinced would fix us, complete us, finally make us okay. And by that definition, a relationship can become one of the most powerful idols of all, because it is a genuinely good thing. And the most dangerous idols are always made from good things, never bad ones. No one worships something they know to be worthless. We worship the good gifts, and in worshipping them we ruin them, because no good gift was ever designed to bear the weight of being a god. God who loves you will not allow this idol to stand. Not because he is jealous in the petty, insecure way that human beings are jealous, but because he knows exactly what an idol does to the person who serves it. An idol always, eventually, devours its worshipper. The thing you must have in order to be happy becomes the thing that controls you, the thing that determines your peace, the thing whose absence can destroy you and whose presence can never quite satisfy you. To make an idol of a relationship is to set yourself up for a particular kind of misery. The misery of needing a human being to be God and watching them fail again and again to be what you have demanded they become. So in the silent season, God does a work of loving demolition. He goes after the idol, and it can be one of the most painful things he ever does, because it often feels, from the inside, like he's taking the thing you want most, or refusing to give it, or holding it just out of reach. But what he is actually doing is far kinder than it feels. He is prying your fingers off of the thing you are gripping too tightly, not to deprive you of it forever, but to heal you of your bondage to it, so that you can one day hold it rightly as a gift, rather than clutching it desperately as a god. There is a deep diagnostic question hidden in this, and it is worth asking yourself honestly tonight. If God came to you and said, "I will give you myself, my presence, my love, my friendship, my joy for the rest of your life, but I will not give you the relationship you have been longing for," would that be enough? Sit with the honesty of your own reaction. For many people, the immediate instinctive answer is no, and the very speed and force of that no reveals the idol. It reveals that somewhere along the way, the gift became more precious than the giver, the created thing more desirable than the creator, and the relationship more essential to your happiness than the God who is the only true source of all happiness. God loves you too much to leave you in that condition, so he works in the silence to dethrone the idol and to restore himself to his rightful place at the center of your heart. And here is the great mercy of it. Only when the relationship comes down off the throne does it become safe for you to actually receive it. Only when God is once again your true treasure, your true portion, your true joy, can a relationship be what it was always meant to be. Not a God who must save you, but a gift you can enjoy with open hands and a free heart. The dethroning is not God depriving you of love. The dethroning is God preparing you to receive love without being destroyed by it. It is worth naming gently the particular shape this idolatry often takes, because naming it is the beginning of being freed from it. For some, the idol is the wedding day itself, a single imagined moment toward which all longing is bent, as though that day would resolve everything and inaugurate a happiness that nothing could touch. For others, the idol is not even a real person, but an image, a composite of every quality they have decided they require, a fantasy so detailed and so demanding that no actual human being could ever match it. For still others, the idol is simply the escape. The longing for a relationship is really a longing to be rescued from a life, a loneliness, a self they cannot bear to be alone with. In each case, the relationship has been asked to do what no relationship can do, to be salvation. And God, in his mercy, will not feed an idol that would only enslave the one who serves it. The freeing of the heart from this idol is, in the end, an act of profound love, and it often comes disguised as disappointment. The door that does not open, the person who does not stay, the longing that goes unmet for one more season. These may be the very instruments by which God is loosening your grip on the thing you have made too important, returning it to its proper size, restoring himself to the center where he belongs. And the strange grace of it is this: the moment the idol comes down, the longing itself becomes bearable again. What was crushing you when it sat on the throne becomes a simple, honest desire once it is returned to its rightful place, a good thing wanted in a good way, held with open hands, no longer demanded as the price of your peace. That is freedom. And God loves you too much to give you the gift before he has freed you to hold it rightly. The eighth silent way. He establishes your direction before he sends a companion. There is an old and simple piece of wisdom buried in the prophet Amos, framed as a question: can two walk together except they be agreed? On the surface, it is about agreement, about shared direction, about two people heading the same way. But underneath it is a truth that reaches directly into the heart of what God is doing in your season of waiting. Before two people can walk together, each of them must be walking somewhere. There must be a direction. There must be a road already chosen, a destination already in view. Two people who are wandering aimlessly do not become unlost simply by wandering aimlessly together. They simply get lost as a pair. And so one of the silent foundational works God does before he ever sends a companion is to establish your direction. He wants to settle in you the question of where your life is going. Not where it is going once you find someone, but where it is going regardless, where it is going because of who you are and who he has called you to be. He is giving you a purpose, a calling, a sense of the road your own feet are meant to walk, so that when a companion does arrive, they are joining a life that is already in motion, rather than rescuing a life that was waiting, parked and aimless, for someone to come and give it meaning. This matters enormously, and it cuts against one of the most common and most damaging assumptions of the waiting heart. So many people, without ever quite saying it out loud, are secretly waiting for a relationship to give their life direction. They imagine that the right person will arrive and everything will suddenly make sense, that the meaning they have been lacking will appear when the relationship does, that their real life will finally begin once they are no longer alone. And so they put their lives on hold. They stop building. They stop pursuing. They stop becoming, because they are waiting for someone else to come and tell them who to be. They treat their singleness as a waiting room, a holding pattern, a blank and meaningless interval before the real thing starts. But God does not want to give a companion to a person who has no direction. He wants to establish your direction first and then send someone to walk it alongside you, because a relationship was never meant to be the source of your life's meaning. It was meant to be a companionship within a meaning you already have. The healthiest, most beautiful, most enduring relationships are not two people who complete each other's emptiness, but two people who each have a sense of calling and purpose and direction, who then choose to walk that road together, each one strengthening and supporting the other in a life that was already worth living before they met. So God uses the silent season to do something that feels, on the surface, like it has nothing to do with relationships at all. He gives you work to do. He plants in you a sense of purpose. He calls you forward into a life of meaning, of service, of contribution, of growth. A life that is full and rich and going somewhere, entirely apart from whether or not you ever find a partner. And in doing this, He is not distracting you from your longing. He is preparing you for its fulfillment. Because the person God is preparing for you is not looking for someone to rescue from aimlessness. They are looking, whether they know it or not, for someone who is already walking a road worth joining. Build your life now. Pursue the calling now. Become a person who is going somewhere now. And do not wait for a companion to give your steps direction, because the deepest desire of a good and worthy companion is not to give you a direction, but to discover that you already have one and to fall in step beside you as you walk it. The scriptures are full of people whom God gave a direction long before He gave them a companion, and the pattern is consistent enough to be worth noticing. Again and again, God called a person to a purpose, set their feet on a road, gave them a work to do, and the relationships, where they came within that calling, rather than in place of it. The calling was never on hold until the companion arrived. The calling came first, and the companion, when given, was given as a fellow traveler on a road already chosen. This tells you something important about how God orders a life. He establishes who you are and where you are going before He sends someone to walk beside you, because He intends the relationship to be a partnership in a purpose, not a substitute for the absence of one. So do not make the mistake of treating your calling as something that can wait until the relationship comes. The calling is part of the preparation for the relationship. The person God may be preparing for you is not looking for an empty life to fill, but for a full life to join. Not for someone with no direction who needs to borrow theirs, but for someone already walking a road worth walking, whose direction and whose purpose make them exactly the kind of companion worth choosing. Pursue your calling now with everything you have. Become a person who is going somewhere. And trust that the God who is establishing your direction in this season is doing so precisely because He intends, in His own time, to send someone to walk that direction alongside you. The ninth silent way. He teaches you to hear His voice in the silence. Most people only learn to listen for God when the noise of their life finally goes quiet. And a season of waiting, painful as it is, has a way of going very quiet indeed. The distractions that once filled the space, the relationships, the pursuits, the constant forward motion that kept the deeper questions at bay, fall away, and you are left, sometimes for the first time in years, in a silence that you did not choose and do not enjoy, But that silence, uncomfortable as it is, turns out to be one of the most spiritually fertile places a human being can stand. Because it is in the silence, far more than in the noise, that we finally learn to hear the voice of God. There is a story in the life of the prophet Elijah that speaks directly to this. Elijah, exhausted and afraid, fleeing for his life, came to a mountain and waited for God to pass by. And there was a great and strong wind that tore the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces. But the Lord was not in the wind, and after the wind an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire a still small voice, a gentle whisper. And it was in the whisper, not in the spectacle, that God finally spoke. The lesson is one that the waiting heart desperately needs. God's voice is most often not in the dramatic, the loud, the overwhelming. It is in the quiet. And to hear a whisper, you must first become quiet enough to listen. This is part of what God is doing in your season of waiting. He is teaching you to hear Him. He is using the very quiet you resent to train your spiritual ear, to attune you to the gentle, persistent, often subtle voice that you would never have learned to recognize amid the noise of a busier and more crowded life. And this is no small skill, no minor side benefit of the waiting. The ability to hear God's voice is, in fact, one of the most important things you could possibly bring into a future relationship. Because a relationship between two people who can each hear God, who can each be led by Him, who can each discern His guidance in the 1,000 decisions that a shared life requires, is a relationship with a foundation that no other relationship can match. Consider how much of the difficulty in relationships comes down to a simple inability to hear well, to hear each other, yes, but more fundamentally to hear God, who alone can give the wisdom, the patience, the conviction, and the guidance that two flawed human beings need in order to build something lasting. A person who has learned to hear God in the silence becomes a person who can be led, corrected, comforted, and directed by Him in the midst of a relationship. And that is a person far better equipped to love, because they are drawing their wisdom and their strength from a source deeper than their own limited resources. So the silence is not punishment. The silence is a school, and the subject being taught is one of the most valuable a person can ever learn. How to be still, how to listen, how to recognize the gentle whisper of God beneath the roar of everything else. The psalmist wrote, "Be still and know that I am God." The stillness comes first, and the knowing follows. You cannot know Him deeply while you are in constant motion, and you cannot hear Him clearly while your life is full of noise. The waiting strips away the noise. And in the strange mercy of God, the very season that feels most empty becomes the season in which you finally learn to hear the voice that will guide you for the rest of your life, including one day into and through the relationship you are praying for now. There is a discipline being formed in you through all of this, and it is one of the most valuable disciplines a person can ever acquire, the discipline of stillness. We live in an age that is terrified of stillness, that fills every empty moment with noise and motion and distraction, that treats silence as a problem to be solved rather than a gift to be received. And so most people never learn to be still, never learn to sit quietly in the presence of God without reaching for their distractions, never develop the capacity to simply be unhurried, unentertained, attentive to the quiet voice that can only be heard when everything else goes silent. But the waiting season, by stripping away some of the noise, forces this discipline upon you, and in doing so it gives you a treasure that will serve you for the rest of your life. For the ability to be still before God is not only the foundation of hearing His voice, it is the foundation of a peace that nothing can disturb. The person who has learned to be still, to rest in God's presence without anxiety, to sit quietly in the silence and find it full rather than empty, has learned something that the restless and the hurried never know. And that stillness becomes a gift, not only to you, but to everyone around you, including one day the person you will share your life with. For a relationship anchored by even one person who knows how to be still before God, who can bring that stillness into the storms and the conflicts and the anxious seasons of a shared life, is a relationship with a deep and steadying anchor that the restless never possess. The stillness you are learning in the silence is a strength you will carry into everything that follows. The 10th silent way. He surrounds you with community that will hold you both. No relationship exists in a vacuum, though the culture of romance does its best to convince us otherwise. We are told the story of two people who are everything to each other, who need no one else, who disappear together into a private world sealed off from everyone around them. It is a beautiful story, and it is a lie, or at least a dangerous half-truth, because the relationships that actually last, the ones that survive the storms and the seasons and the slow grind of ordinary years, are almost never the ones that exist in isolation. They are the ones that are held, supported, strengthened, and sustained by a community of people who surround them and refuse to let them fall. And so one of the quiet, often unnoticed works that God does in the season before a relationship is the building of community around you. He is placing people in your life, friends, mentors, spiritual family, the kind of steady and faithful relationships that have nothing to do with romance, who are, without any of you fully realizing it, being prepared to one day hold and support the relationship that is still to come. The friendships you are building now are not a consolation prize for the romance you do not yet have. They are part of the very foundation on which a future romance will one day stand. There is profound wisdom in the book of Ecclesiastes about this, often read at weddings, but rarely understood in its fullness. Two are better than one, it says, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. And then it goes further. Though one may be overpowered, two can withstand him. And a threefold cord is not quickly broken. A threefold cord, not a twofold one. The image is striking and deliberate. The strongest bond is not two strands alone, but two strands woven together with a third. And in the deepest sense, that third strand is God Himself, woven through the relationship. But there is also a truth here about the community that surrounds a couple, the additional cords of friendship and family and spiritual fellowship that strengthen what two people alone could never sustain by themselves. A relationship held only by the two people in it is fragile, because two people, however much they love each other, are still only two flawed human beings who will at times fail each other, exhaust each other, and run dry. But a relationship surrounded by community is held by far more than the strength of the two. When the couple is weak, the community holds them. When they are in conflict, wise voices speak into the situation. When they are weary, others step in. When they are tempted to give up, they are surrounded by people who have committed to not letting them. The community becomes the banks of the river, keeping the relationship within its course when its own current alone might have spilled over and lost its way. So, the friendships God is building in your life right now matter more than you know. The mentors He is providing, the spiritual family He is gathering around you, the faithful and ordinary relationships that you might be tempted to overlook because they are not the romance you are longing for. These are part of His preparation. He is not only preparing you for a person, He is preparing a community to hold you and that person together, a web of love and support and accountability that will be there long after the first rush of romance has faded into the deeper and more durable thing that lasting love becomes. Invest in those relationships now. Do not treat them as a holding pattern. Do not withdraw into isolation while you wait, telling yourself that real connection will begin only when the romance does. The connection God is building now is real, it is valuable, and it is part of the foundation. And one day, when the relationship you are praying for finally comes, it will not arrive into an empty and isolated life. It will arrive into a life already rich with love, a community already in place, already strong, already prepared to hold you both. There is also a quieter benefit to the community God gathers in this season, one that speaks directly to the loneliness of waiting. The friendships and the spiritual family He places around you now are not merely preparation for a future relationship. They are a present provision for a present need. You were never meant to bear the waiting alone, and God knows this. So He surrounds you in the very season of your longing with people who can walk alongside you, who can carry what you cannot carry by yourself, who can remind you of the truth when you are too weary to remember it, who can sit with you in the silence so that the silence is not also solitude. The community is a gift for now, not only a foundation for later. Receive it as such. Let the people God has placed around you be the companions of your waiting, and you will find that the road, though long, is not nearly as lonely as the enemy would have you believe. And there is a beauty in the way these present friendships prepare the ground for a future love, without anyone intending it. The people who learn to love you well in this season are learning the very thing your future spouse will need them to know: how to stand with you, how to support you, how to be family to you. And you, in turn, are learning how to receive love, how to let people in, how to be helped and held and known by a community, which is itself a kind of training for the deeper letting in that a marriage will require. The web of relationships God is weaving around you now is both a present comfort and a future foundation, and the same patient hand is at work in both. Do not isolate yourself in your waiting. Let yourself be surrounded. The community is part of the preparation, and it is also part of the provision, and God means it for your good in both. The 11th silent way. He tests and strengthens your faith. There is a kind of faith that has never been tested, and it is a fragile and untrustworthy thing. It is the faith of fair weather, the faith of the person who has never had to believe God in the dark, who has never had to hold on to a promise that seemed to be failing, who has never stood in the long gap between a prayer and its answer and chosen to keep trusting anyway. That kind of faith feels strong while everything is going well, but it has never been proven, and untested faith is always weaker than it imagines itself to be. It is the season of waiting, the long, uncomfortable, answerless season that takes the untested faith and turns it into something real. Because waiting is, at its heart, an exercise in faith. To wait well is to keep trusting God when you cannot see what He is doing. It is to keep believing in His goodness when His goodness is not currently visible in your circumstances. It is to hold on to the conviction that He has not forgotten you, that He is working, that the silence is not abandonment, to hold on to all of that in the absence of any external proof, on the strength of His character alone. And that is precisely what faith is. Faith, the scriptures say, is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, not the things seen, the things not seen. Faith operates exactly in the territory of the unseen, the unproven, the not yet. And the waiting season is one long, intensive training in living by faith rather than by sight. God uses this. He uses the waiting to strengthen a faith that the rest of your life will depend on, including and especially the relationship you are praying for. Because here is something the longing heart rarely considers. A marriage, a lasting relationship, will itself require enormous faith. There will be seasons within it that are dark, that are hard, that test everything. There will be times when you cannot see what God is doing in your partner, or in your circumstances, or in the relationship itself, and you will have to trust Him in the dark all over again. The faith you are building now, in the waiting, is faith you will need then. God is not wasting this season. He is forging in you a strength of trust that will hold not only through the wait, but through everything that comes after it. Think of the great examples the scriptures hold up. Abraham, who waited decades for a promised son, whose faith was tested across years of apparent silence, and who became, through that very testing, the father of faith for all who would come after. The promise did not come quickly. It came slowly, through a long and bewildering wait, and it was in the waiting that Abraham's faith was forged into the thing that the whole of history would remember. God was not merely making Abraham wait for a son. God was making Abraham, building in him through the wait, a faith that could carry the weight of everything God intended to do through his life. And so it is with you. The waiting is not only about the person you are waiting for. It is about the faith God is building in you through the waiting itself, a faith that will not collapse the moment circumstances turn hard, a faith that has learned to trust in the dark, a faith that has stood in the gap between prayer and answer and come out the other side stronger rather than shattered. That faith is a treasure. It is worth more than the easy years could ever have produced. And it is being forged in you right now, in the very silence you most wish would end. So when the waiting feels unbearable, remember what it is doing. It is not only delaying a gift, it is building a strength. And the strength it is building is one you will carry, and one you will need for the whole of the life that is still to come. There is a particular comfort hidden in the stories of those who waited longest in the scriptures, and it is this: God was never absent in their waiting, even when he seemed most silent. Joseph waited years in a prison for a deliverance that seemed never to come, and yet the text says, quietly and repeatedly, that the Lord was with him, present in the very cell that looked like the place God had forgotten him. Hannah waited through years of barrenness and grief, pouring out a longing so deep that others mistook it for drunkenness, and God was hearing every unspoken word the whole time. The waiting was real and the silence was real, but the presence was just as real, woven through every hour that felt like absence. And the same is true of you. The God who feels silent is not absent. He is with you in the waiting, as surely as he was with Joseph in the prison and Hannah in her grief. And the faith you are building now is being built in his presence, not in his absence, however it may feel. And this is the secret that turns waiting from mere endurance into something closer to communion. If God is present in the waiting, if the silence is not abandonment, but a particular kind of nearness, then the waiting itself becomes a place of meeting rather than a place of exile. The faith you are forging is not faith in a distant deity who may or may not act, but trust in a present companion who is with you in the very thing you are enduring. Abraham did not wait alone, and neither do you. The God who promised is the God who stays, and the long gap between the promise and its fulfillment is not empty space. It is filled the whole way through with the presence of the one who is doing the promising. Learn to find him there in the gap, and the waiting becomes not the absence of what you long for, but the deepening of your hold on the one who is better than anything you long for. The 12th silent way. He reveals your own heart to you. It is a strange and humbling truth that we are in many ways strangers to ourselves. We imagine that we know our own hearts, that we understand our own motives, that we are the foremost authority on who we are and what we want and why we do what we do. But the scriptures tell us, and life eventually confirms, that the heart is deep and deceptive, and that there are things buried within us that we have never seen, never named, never acknowledged. Patterns and fears and motives and wounds that operate beneath the surface of our awareness, shaping our choices without our consent. And one of the most valuable things that a season of waiting can do is bring those hidden things, at last, into the light. Waiting has a way of revealing the heart. When the distraction of constant motion falls away, when the noise quiets and the busyness slows, the things that were hidden begin to surface. The fears you did not know you had begin to make themselves known. The idols you did not realize you were serving begin to show their faces. The motives behind your longing, some of them pure, some of them less so, begin to become visible. The waiting becomes a mirror, and in that mirror you begin to see yourself more truly than you ever could, while everything was moving too fast for reflection. This is uncomfortable. It is, in fact, one of the most uncomfortable aspects of the waiting season, because the self that the silence reveals is not always the self we imagined ourselves to be. We discover that some of our longing for a relationship is actually a longing to be rescued from ourselves, from our own emptiness, from the discomfort of our own company. We discover that some of our desire is driven by comparison, by the wound of watching others have what we lack, by a quiet competitiveness we are ashamed to admit. We discover impatience we did not know we had, and demands we did not know we were making, and 1,000 small selfishnesses that we had successfully hidden from ourselves until the silence brought them up to the surface. But here is the mercy in it. You cannot heal what you cannot see, and you cannot surrender what you have never acknowledged. The revealing is not God shaming you. The revealing is God showing you the truth so that the truth can be dealt with, transformed, healed, surrendered. He brings the hidden thing into the light, not to condemn you, but to free you from it, because a thing that operates in the dark, unseen and unexamined, has a power over you that it loses the moment it is brought into the light and laid before God. The self-knowledge that the waiting produces is not a curse. It is one of the most valuable gifts God can give you before He gives you another person to share your life with. Because consider what happens when two people who do not know themselves try to build a life together. They bring all their hidden patterns into the relationship, all their unexamined wounds and unacknowledged fears and unseen motives, and they act them out on each other without ever understanding what they are doing or why. The relationship becomes a stage on which two strangers to themselves, perform their hidden brokenness in confusing and painful ways, each one baffled by their own reactions and wounded by the others. But a person who has done the hard work of self-knowledge, who has let the waiting reveal their own heart and has brought what was revealed to God for healing, comes into a relationship with a self-awareness that changes everything. They can name what is happening in them. They can take responsibility for their own patterns. They can recognize their own wounds rather than blindly inflicting them on someone else. So let the waiting do its revealing work. Do not run from what the silence shows you. When you see, in the quiet, a fear or a motive or a pattern you do not like, do not look away and do not despair. Bring it to God. Let it be named, examined, healed, surrendered. The self-knowledge you gain in this season is a gift to the person you will one day love, and an even greater gift to yourself, because a person who knows their own heart is a person far better equipped to give it well. The 13th silent way. He builds your integrity in the hidden places. There is a question worth asking yourself, and it is one of the most revealing questions a person can ever face. Who are you when no one is watching? Not the version of yourself that you present to the world, the carefully managed self that shows up where others can see it, but the real self, the one that exists in private, in the unwatched hours, in the choices that no one else will ever know about. Because that hidden self, the one in the dark, is the truest measure of who you actually are. And it is precisely there, in the hidden places where no one is watching, that God does some of His most important preparatory work. Integrity is, at its root, the quality of being undivided. of being the same person in private that you are in public, the same person in the dark that you are in the light. A person of integrity is whole, integrated, consistent. There is no gap between the self they show and the self they are. And this quality, so rare and so precious, is built entirely in the hidden places. It cannot be built in public, because public behavior is always at least partly a performance. It can only be built where no one is watching, in the private choices, the secret disciplines, the unseen moments of either faithfulness or compromise that slowly, over time, make you into the person you are becoming. God cares deeply about who you are in the hidden places, and He is at work there, in the season of waiting, building in you an integrity that the future relationship will absolutely require. Because a relationship is, more than almost anything else in human life, an exercise in trust. And trust can only be built on integrity. The person you will one day share your life with will need to be able to trust you completely, not only in the moments when you are seen, but precisely in the moments when you are not. They will need to know that the person you are when they are watching is the same person you are when they are not. And that kind of trustworthiness is not summoned into existence on the wedding day. It is built quietly and invisibly in the hidden choices of the years that come before. Consider how much of the damage done within relationships comes from a failure of integrity in the hidden places. The secret habits, the private compromises, the gap between the public self and the hidden one that eventually widens until it cracks the whole relationship open. The person who has not built integrity in private will struggle to maintain it in a relationship, because the relationship simply provides more hidden places, more opportunities for the divided self to act out in the dark what it would never do in the light. But the person who has done the hard, unglamorous work of becoming whole in private, of being the same in the dark as in the light, brings into the relationship a foundation of trustworthiness that nothing can shake. So God uses the season of waiting to build your integrity in the hidden places. The private disciplines you are developing now, the prayer no one sees, the choices no one knows about, the small faithfulnesses in the unwatched hours, these are not minor. They are the very substance of the character you will one day bring into a relationship. Every hidden choice to do the right thing when no one would ever know is a deposit into the account of your integrity, and that account is what a future spouse will one day draw on for the trust that a shared life requires. The scriptures tell us that God sees in secret, that He is the one who looks not on the outward appearance, but on the heart, who is present in the hidden places where no human eye can follow. And this is not a threat. It is, for the person who is being shaped, a profound comfort and a great dignity. The God who sees in secret is the God who is at work in secret, building in you, in the unwatched hours, the integrity that will one day make you a person worth trusting with another human life. Do not neglect the hidden places. It is there, more than anywhere, that the real you is being formed. This is also, quietly, a matter of how you will treat the person you one day love when no one else is in the room. For the public face of a relationship is easy. Almost anyone can be kind and attentive in front of others, where reputation is at stake and an audience is watching. But the truest test of love is how a person behaves in the unwatched privacy of a shared life, the tone of voice when no one else can hear it, the patience or impatience that surfaces when the doors are closed, the thousand small choices to honor or to dishonor that take place entirely beyond the sight of any observer. The integrity God is building in you now, in the hidden places, is the very thing that will determine whether you love well in those unwatched hours. The person who is faithful in secret before God will be faithful in secret with their spouse, because integrity, once formed, does not switch itself off when the audience disappears. So the secret disciplines of this season are not small, and they are not separate from your preparation for love. The honesty you practice when a lie would be easier and no one would know. The purity you guard when compromise is available and invisible. The faithfulness to God you maintain in the private hours that no one will ever see. Every one of these is forming in you the undivided self, the whole self, the self that is the same in the dark as in the light, and that self is the only kind of self that can be safely trusted with the intimacy and the privacy of another human life. Build it now in the secret place. The God who sees in secret is forming there the very trustworthiness that your future love will one day rest upon. The 14th silent way. He aligns your timing with another life you cannot see. Here is something almost impossible to fully grasp from inside the waiting, and yet it is one of the most staggering things God is doing in the silence. He is not only working on you. Somewhere else, in another life you cannot see and have never met, He may be working on someone too. And the timing of your two lives, the slow and intricate alignment of two separate stories so that they arrive at the same place at the same moment, is a work of divine choreography, so complex and so precise that you could never orchestrate it yourself, even if you tried. Think about what it actually requires for two people to meet at the right time. Not just to meet, people meet all the time, but to meet at the moment when both of them are ready, when both have been prepared, when both have grown into the people they needed to become, when the circumstances of both their lives have aligned to make the meeting possible and the relationship sustainable. That kind of timing cannot be manufactured. It involves two entire lives, with all their twists and turns and seasons and stages, somehow converging at a single point. And only a God who stands outside of time, who sees the end from the beginning, who holds every thread of every life in His hands, could possibly weave two separate stories together with that kind of precision. This is part of why the waiting takes as long as it takes. It is not only that you are not ready, though that may be part of it. It may also be that they are not ready. The person God is preparing for you may be in the middle of their own season of shaping, their own wounds being healed, their own desires being refined, their own faith being forged. They may have their own road still to walk before the two roads can meet. And God, in His perfect knowledge, is timing it all, slowing one life and hastening another, opening one door and closing another, arranging the 1,000 small circumstances that will eventually bring two prepared people to the same place at the same moment, ready at last for each other in a way they could never have been at any earlier point. There is something deeply comforting in this, if you will let it settle in. Your waiting is not a sign that God has failed to act. Your waiting may be a sign that God is acting on more than one life at once, coordinating a meeting that requires both of you to be ready and refusing to bring you together one moment before that readiness has been achieved in both. The delay you experience as God withholding may in fact be God protecting you from meeting the right person at the wrong time before either of you was prepared, when the relationship would have failed, not because you were wrong for each other, but because you arrived before you were ready. We see this principle throughout the Scriptures, this divine attention to timing, the fullness of time, the appointed hour, the moment that God has set and no one can hasten. Again and again, God acts not a moment too early and not a moment too late, but exactly when the time is full, when everything has been prepared, when all the pieces are in place, when the moment is finally ripe for what He intends to do. And He brings that same attention to timing, to the joining of two lives. He is not careless with it. He is not slow in the way we count slowness. He is precise, and His precision requires a patience that we, who cannot see the other life or the larger picture, experience as an agonizing delay. So trust the timing, even when you cannot understand it. The God who is preparing you is the same God who may be preparing someone else, and the same God who is weaving your two timelines together with a care and a precision that you will only fully appreciate when you finally look back from the other side. The wait is not empty. The wait is, among everything else it is, an act of divine timing, the patient alignment of two lives that you could never have aligned yourself, arranged by the only one who could possibly see both of them at once. The 15th silent way. He cultivates your trust in his goodness underneath almost every struggle of the waiting heart. If you dig down far enough, you will find a single root question. It is not really a question about timing, or about whether the right person exists, or about what is wrong with you. It is a question about God himself, and it is this: is he good? Is God actually good? Not in the abstract, not in theory, but toward me, in the specific shape of my unanswered longing. Can I trust that the one who is withholding the thing I want is doing so out of love rather than indifference, out of wisdom rather than neglect? That question lives at the very bottom of the waiting, and one of the most important works God does in the silence is to cultivate in you a settled trust in his goodness. Because here is the truth that the enemy of your soul works tirelessly to obscure. The hardest moment to believe in God's goodness is precisely the moment when his goodness is not visible in your circumstances. When the prayer is answered, when the longing is fulfilled, when the gift is given, anyone can believe God is good in that moment. But to believe in his goodness in the empty season, in the silence, in the long stretch where the thing you want most has not come and shows no sign of coming, that is a deeper and a costlier faith, and it is exactly the faith God is cultivating in you now. He's teaching you to trust not in his gifts but in his character, not in what he gives but in who he is. This is the deepest and most important transformation that the waiting can produce. A person who only trusts God when he is giving them what they want does not really trust God at all. They trust the gifts, and they tolerate the giver as the means of getting them. But a person who has learned to trust God's goodness, even in the absence of the gift, has learned something that will sustain them through everything life will ever throw at them. They have moved from a transactional faith to a relational one, from loving God for what he provides to loving God for who he is. And that transformation, which only the waiting could have produced, is worth more than the gift you are waiting for could ever be. Remember what the scriptures declare about the goodness of God, and let it answer the question at the bottom of your waiting. He is the God who did not spare his own Son, but delivered him up for us all. And the logic that follows is unbreakable. How shall he not, with him, also freely give us all things? If God has already given you the greatest gift, the costliest gift, the gift of his own Son poured out for your salvation, then his goodness toward you is no longer in question. It has been settled, once and for all, at the cross. Whatever he withholds, he does not withhold out of any deficit of love, because the love has already been proven beyond any possible doubt. The God who gave you his Son is not suddenly stingy with lesser things. If he withholds in love, for reasons that his proven goodness guarantees are good, even when you cannot see them. So the waiting becomes the soil in which a deep and unshakable trust in God's goodness can finally take root. And this trust is, perhaps, the single most important thing you could bring into a future relationship, because you will not always understand what God is doing, even then. There will be seasons in any relationship where his goodness is hidden, where his purposes are unclear, where you will have to trust him in the dark all over again. The trust you are building now, the hard-won conviction that God is good, even when you cannot see it, is the very trust that will hold you steady through every dark season still to come. He is cultivating it in you now, in the silence, and it is one of the greatest gifts the waiting will ever give you. It helps to remember that the goodness of God is not measured by the ease of our circumstances, because if it were, we would have to conclude that God was good to us only on our comfortable days and unkind to us on our hard ones. And that is no God at all, only a mood projected onto the sky. The goodness of God is a fixed reality, as unchanging as his nature, entirely independent of whether our particular longings are being met in any given season. The sun does not stop shining because clouds have hidden it from view, and the goodness of God does not stop being real because your circumstances have hidden it from your sight. The clouds are temporary, the sun is permanent. And faith is, in large part, the settled conviction that the sun is still there above the clouds, still shining, still warm, still good, even on the days you cannot see it at all. This is the conviction the waiting is meant to forge in you, and it is worth more than the thing you are waiting for. For one day the cloud will pass, and you will see in hindsight what you could not see in the moment, that the goodness was there the whole time, working in ways you could not trace, accomplishing in the silence what the answer alone could never have accomplished. And the trust you built in the dark, when you could not see, will turn out to have been the truest worship of all. The worship not of God's gifts, but of God himself, offered not because you finally got what you wanted, but because you came to know in the long waiting that he was good regardless. That kind of trust is rare and precious and unshakable, and it is being built in you right now, in exactly the season where his goodness is hardest to see. The 16th silent way. He prunes what will not serve the life to come. There is an image that Jesus used to describe how God works in the life of someone he loves, and it is not a comfortable one, but it is one of the most important for the waiting heart to understand. He spoke of a vine and a gardener, and he said that every branch that bears fruit, the gardener prunes, cuts back, removes, trims away, so that it may bear more fruit. Pruning. The deliberate cutting away of things that are alive, things that are growing, things the branch itself would never have chosen to lose. Also that the branch can become more fruitful than it ever could have been if it had been left to grow wild and unchecked. This is one of the silent works God does in the season of waiting, and it is often one of the most painful, because pruning always involves loss. He cuts away things from your life, sometimes relationships that were not serving you, sometimes pursuits that were leading you nowhere, sometimes habits and patterns and even good things that for reasons you may not understand, he is removing to make room for what is to come. And in the moment, pruning never feels like love. It feels like loss. It feels like deprivation. It feels like things are being taken from you, like your life is becoming smaller and barer rather than fuller. But the gardener who prunes is not diminishing the vine. He is preparing it for a fruitfulness that the unpruned vine could never achieve. Consider what God may be cutting away in your life right now, and consider the possibility that it is pruning rather than punishment. The relationships that have fallen away, perhaps some of them needed to fall away because they would not have served the life you are being prepared for. The doors that have closed, perhaps some of them needed to close because the path behind them led somewhere God was lovingly steering you away from. The things you have lost, the plans that have failed, the seasons that have ended. What if at least some of it was the gardener's careful hand, cutting away what would not serve the life to come, making room, clearing space, preparing the branch for a fruitfulness that requires exactly this kind of loss. This reframes the losses of the waiting season in a way that can change everything. The waiting is not only a time of not receiving, it is also often a time of losing, of watching things fall away, of feeling your life grow barer in ways you did not choose and do not understand. But if the hand behind the loss is the hand of a loving gardener who prunes only in order to increase fruitfulness, then even the losses are working for your good. Even the things being cut away are part of the preparation. The gardener does not prune the branches he intends to abandon. He prunes the branches he loves, the branches he has plans for, the branches he intends to make more fruitful than they have ever been. And there is a tender promise hidden in this image, one the waiting heart should hold close. The pruning is never the end of the story. The pruning is always for the sake of a greater fruitfulness still to come. The gardener cuts back in the barren season precisely because he sees the abundant season ahead and is preparing the vine to bear its full weight of fruit. So if your life feels, in this season, like it is being cut back, like things are being taken rather than given, like the branch is barer than it was, do not despair and do not assume that God has turned against you. Consider that the gardener is at work, that the cutting is for the sake of a coming abundance, and that the very losses you grieve may be the preparation for a fruitfulness in love and in life that you cannot yet imagine. He prunes what he loves, and he is preparing you, even through loss, for the life that is still to come. The 17th silent way. He forms the character a lasting love requires. When we are young and longing for love, we think almost entirely about compatibility, about chemistry, about finding the person who feels right, who fits, who makes our heart race. We give very little thought to the thing that actually determines whether a relationship will last, and it is not compatibility, and it is not chemistry. It is character. The slow-built, deeply forged, unglamorous quality of character is what carries a relationship through the decades, long after the initial chemistry has settled and the early compatibility has been tested by the friction of two real lives sharing one space. And character is precisely what God is forming in you, quietly and persistently, in the season of waiting. Chemistry will get two people together, only character will keep them together. The early days of any relationship run on feeling, on the rush, the excitement, the intoxicating sense of having found someone. But feelings are weather. They come and go. They rise and fall. They cannot be the foundation of anything that needs to last. What carries a relationship through the long years, through the hard seasons, through the inevitable disappointments and conflicts and ordinary grinding difficulties of two flawed people sharing a life, is character. The kindness that persists when the feeling has faded, the faithfulness that holds when it would be easier to leave, the patience and the humility and the selflessness and the steadiness that no rush of romance can supply, but only a formed and tested character can provide. And character cannot be rushed. This is the hard truth at the center of this silent way. Character is forged slowly, through trial, through discipline, through the patient accumulation of right choices over time, through exactly the kind of testing and shaping that a season of waiting provides. There is no shortcut to it, no way to acquire it quickly, no method by which a person can suddenly become deep and steady and faithful and kind, without the long, slow work of formation that produces those qualities. The waiting is that work. The silence is that formation. The very season you wish would end is the season in which God is building in you the character that a lasting love will one day require. Think of the qualities that make a person able to love well over a lifetime, and notice that not one of them can be acquired quickly. Faithfulness, the capacity to stay, to keep your word, to remain committed through every season, is built only through the practice of staying faithful in many smaller things over a long time. Patience, the capacity to bear with another person's faults without bitterness, is built only through the experience of being made to wait and to endure. Humility, the capacity to admit fault, to yield, to put another ahead of yourself, is built only through the slow, often humbling experiences that teach a person they are not the center of the world. Every one of these qualities, the very qualities a lasting love most requires, is forged in exactly the kind of season you may be resenting right now. So God is using the waiting to form your character, And this is perhaps the most important preparation of all, because it is the most durable. The chemistry will fade. The compatibility will be tested. But the character that God is forging in you now will remain, and it will be the very thing that carries you through the long faithfulness that real love turns out to require. The God who is making you wait is using the wait to make you into a person of character, a person capable not merely of falling in love, which requires nothing, but of staying in love, of building love, of sustaining love across a lifetime, which requires everything. And that character, slowly forged in the silence, is one of the greatest gifts the waiting will ever give you, and one of the greatest gifts you will one day give to the person you love. It is worth pausing to consider how character is actually tested, because the testing reveals what the calm seasons conceal. Anyone can appear kind when they are well-rested and unprovoked. The question is who you are when you are tired, when you are wronged, when you are disappointed, when the other person has failed you and you are entirely within your rights to respond in kind. It is in exactly those moments that character or its absence comes to light. And the waiting season, with all its disappointments and its frustrations and its long unmet longing, is precisely a season of testing, a season in which the true state of your character is being revealed to you and, by the grace of God, refined. Every disappointment you meet with grace rather than bitterness is building character. Every frustration you bear without becoming hard is building character. The very difficulties of the waiting are the workshop in which the durable qualities of a lasting love are being forged. And there is a deep encouragement in understanding this, because it means that none of the difficulty is wasted. The waiting that feels so pointless, so empty, so much like nothing is happening, is in fact accomplishing one of the most important works that can ever be done in a human life: the slow formation of a character capable of love. You are not merely passing time, you are being made into someone. And the someone you are being made into, patient, faithful, humble, kind, steady, formed by the very trials you wish you could skip, is exactly the someone that a lasting love requires. The God who is forming you is not wasting a single moment of the formation, however slow and however hidden it may feel from inside the season itself. The 18th silent way. He teaches you to steward what you already have. There is a principle that runs all through the teaching of Jesus, and it has direct and searching application to the season of waiting. He taught again and again that the one who is faithful in little will be entrusted with much, and that the one who is faithful in what belongs to another will be given something of their own. The principle is consistent and unavoidable. Faithfulness with what you have now is the qualification for receiving more later. And this means that the way you steward your present life, your single life, the life you have right now, before the relationship comes, is not separate from your preparation for what is to come. It is the very heart of it. We tend to imagine that our real life will begin when the thing we are waiting for arrives. That the present, the single season, is a kind of waiting room, an interval to be endured, a time of less than that we are simply getting through on the way to the real thing. But God does not see it that way at all. God sees the present season as a stewardship. He has given you a life right now. This life with its time, its resources, its relationships, its opportunities, its gifts. And the question that matters to Him is not how impatiently you are waiting for the next thing, but how faithfully you are stewarding the thing you already have. Are you living this season well? Are you using what you have been given? Are you faithful in the little that is yours right now? Because here is the principle laid bare. If you cannot steward a single life well, you will not suddenly steward a shared life well. If you are wasting the time, the freedom, the resources, and the opportunities of your present season, the arrival of a relationship will not transform you into a faithful steward. It will simply give you more to waste. But if you are faithful now, If you are using your single season to grow, to serve, to build, to give, to become, then you are demonstrating the very faithfulness that qualifies a person to be entrusted with more. The way you handle the life you have is the truest indicator of how you will handle the life you are praying for. This reframes the entire single season in a way that is both challenging and liberating. It is challenging because it removes the excuse of waiting. You cannot put your life on hold until the relationship comes, because the way you live now is itself the preparation. But it is liberating because it gives the present season profound meaning and purpose. Your single life is not a void to be endured. It is a stewardship to be lived faithfully. It is a gift to be used well. It is, in fact, a unique season with unique opportunities, freedoms and possibilities that the married seasons of life will not afford. And God is watching to see whether you will steward those opportunities faithfully or squander them in restless waiting for something else. So invest this season, use the time, develop the gifts, serve in the ways that your current freedom allows, build the disciplines, deepen the friendships, pursue the calling, grow in every way you can grow. Do not waste the single season wishing it were a different season, because the faithfulness you show now is the very thing that prepares you for what is to come. The one who is faithful in little will be entrusted with much, and the much you are praying for is being prepared in part by the faithfulness you bring to the little you already hold. Steward it well. This season is not a waiting room. It is a trust. The 19th silent way. He frees you from the need for another's approval. There is a chain that binds a great many people without their ever knowing it, and it is one of the most quietly limiting forces in a human life. It is the need for the approval of others, the deep, often unconscious craving to be validated, accepted, affirmed, and approved by the people around us. And it is a particularly dangerous chain to carry into a relationship, because a person who needs another's approval in order to feel okay will inevitably hand that other person a power over them that no human being should ever hold. One of the silent works God does in the season of waiting is to break this chain, to free you from the need for human approval, so that you can love and be loved as a free person rather than a captive one. The need for approval distorts everything it touches. A person who needs to be approved of cannot be fully honest, because honesty risks disapproval. They cannot set boundaries, because boundaries risk displeasure. They cannot be their true self, because the true self might not be approved of, and so they perform a more acceptable version instead. They are forever managing the impressions of others, forever adjusting themselves to win acceptance, forever bound by the fear of what others will think. And when such a person enters a relationship, they bring all of this with them, and the relationship becomes another stage on which they perform, another source of the approval they are addicted to, another place where they cannot be fully honest or fully themselves, because the fear of disapproval governs everything. God wants to free you from this before He gives you a relationship, because a relationship is no place to be working out your need for approval. It is too important, too intimate, too central to be turned into a mechanism for feeding a hunger for validation. And so, in the silence of the waiting season, God does a deep work of liberation. He teaches you to find your approval in Him, to rest in the acceptance that He has already given you, the acceptance secured not by your performance, but by the love that He poured out for you before you had done anything at all to earn it. He teaches you that you are already approved, already accepted, already loved by the only one whose verdict ultimately matters. And that once that verdict is settled, the approval of others loses its power to control you. The Apostle Paul, who knew this chain and had been freed from it, wrote a sentence that captures the freedom God is working toward in you. He said, "If I still pleased men, I would not be a servant of Christ." The two could not coexist. To be enslaved to the approval of others is to be unable to fully serve God, because the two masters pull in different directions, and the fear of human disapproval will always, eventually, override obedience to God. Paul had been set free from that fear. He had found his identity, his acceptance, and his approval so completely in God that the opinions of others had lost their power to control him, and that freedom made him capable of a love and a service that the approval-bound person can never achieve. This is the freedom God is cultivating in you, and it is one of the most important things you could possibly bring into a relationship, because only a free person can love freely. A person who is liberated from the need for approval can be fully honest in a relationship, can set healthy boundaries, can be their true self, can love without the constant anxious management of impressions, can give and receive without the distortion that the need for validation always introduces. The waiting season, by removing some of the usual sources of approval, often forces this liberation, drives you back to God as the only sufficient source of the acceptance you crave, and in doing so, sets you free. Do not resist that work. The freedom from the need for others' approval is one of the greatest gifts the waiting can give, and one of the truest foundations for a love that is honest, healthy, and free. The 20th silent way. He deepens your capacity for intimacy with him. First, here is a truth that almost no one tells the longing heart, and yet it is one of the most important truths of all. The deepest intimacy you will ever know is not the intimacy of human relationship. It is the intimacy of communion with God Himself, and the capacity for that intimacy, the ability to be deeply known and deeply loved, to open the hidden self and be met there with love rather than rejection, is built first in your relationship with God, before it is ever expressed in a relationship with another person. One of the most precious works God does in the season of waiting is the deepening of your intimacy with Him, and that deepened capacity becomes the very foundation of every human intimacy that follows. Intimacy, at its heart, is the experience of being fully known and fully loved at the same time. It is the dropping of the masks, the opening of the hidden places, the willingness to be seen as you truly are, and to discover, in that nakedness of soul, that you are loved anyway. It is the rarest and most precious thing in human experience, and also the most frightening, because to be truly known is to risk rejection, and most of us would rather be loved for a self we perform than risk being rejected for the self we actually are. But God offers, and the waiting season often deepens, an intimacy that is unlike any human relationship, the experience of being completely known more thoroughly than any human being could ever know us, and completely loved at the same time, with no gap between the knowing and the loving, no part of us hidden, no possibility of rejection. This is the intimacy God deepens in the silence. When the noise of life falls away, when the distractions are removed, when you are driven by your very loneliness back into His presence, you begin to discover a closeness with God that you might never have found in a busier and more crowded season. You learn to bring Him the hidden self, the fears, the failures, the longings, the parts you show no one, and you discover that He meets you there not with rejection, but with love. You learn to be known by Him, and to rest in being known, and to find in His presence the deep companionship that you had been seeking, perhaps without realizing it, in the longing for a human relationship all along. And here is why this matters so profoundly for the relationship you are praying for. The capacity for intimacy that you develop with God becomes the capacity for intimacy you bring to another person. A person who has learned to be deeply known and deeply loved by God has learned the very thing that human intimacy requires: the willingness to drop the masks, to open the hidden self, to risk being seen, and to discover love on the other side of that risk. But a person who has never known that intimacy with God, who has never let themselves be truly known even by Him, will struggle to find it with another human being, because they have never learned the vulnerability that intimacy requires. The intimacy with God comes first, and it teaches the soul how to be intimate at all. There is a beautiful and ancient truth here, that the human longing for intimacy, the ache to be known and loved, is ultimately a longing for God, and that it finds its truest fulfillment in Him first, before it finds any partial fulfillment in human relationship. The relationship you are praying for, however wonderful, will never be able to fully satisfy the longing to be known and loved. Only God can do that, and a human relationship that is asked to do it will buckle under the impossible weight. But a person who has found that deep intimacy with God first comes into a human relationship already satisfied at the deepest level, bringing not a desperate hunger to be finally known, but a glad capacity for intimacy that has already been awakened and fed at the only source that could fully supply it. The waiting deepens your intimacy with God, and that deepened intimacy is the truest foundation of every human closeness that will ever follow. There is a profound implication in this that can reframe the entire ache of loneliness. The loneliness you feel in the waiting season, the deep, sometimes painful sense of being unaccompanied in a way that no friendship quite resolves, is not at its root only a longing for a human being. It is a longing for communion, for the deepest kind of being known, and that longing is one that God Himself placed in you, and one that God Himself most fully answers. The waiting season, by intensifying the loneliness, often drives you toward the very communion with God that the loneliness was always, at the deepest level, crying out for. And many people discover, in exactly the season they thought would be the emptiest of their lives, the richest and most intimate communion with God they have ever known, a closeness that the busier and more accompanied seasons had never allowed. This does not mean the longing for human companionship is wrong or that God intends you to remain alone. It means that the deepest fountain has to be found first, so that the human relationship, when it comes, is not asked to be the fountain. A person who has found their deepest communion in God brings to a human relationship a soul that is already satisfied at its center, and such a soul is free to love generously, without the desperation of one who needs the other person to fill an emptiness that only God can fill. The intimacy with God comes first, and it does two things at once. It satisfies the deepest longing, and it teaches the soul the very vulnerability and openness that human intimacy will one day require. The waiting deepens both, and the person formed by that deepening is a person prepared, as few are, for a closeness that is healthy, generous, and free. The 21st Silent Way. He prepares you to be a gift, not just to receive one. We come now to the last of the 21 silent ways, and it gathers up everything that has come before into a single, transforming idea. Through all the longing for a relationship, our focus is almost entirely on what we will receive. We dream of the person who will be given to us, the love we will get, the companionship we will gain, the way another life will fill and complete and bless our own. We think almost without exception about receiving, but God, in all His silent preparation, is working towards something we rarely consider. He is preparing you not merely to receive a gift, but to be one, to become yourself, a blessing to another life. To arrive in a relationship not primarily as someone who gets, but as someone who gives, a gift prepared by God for the person He is preparing for you. This is the great reversal at the heart of all godly love, and it changes everything. The world teaches us to ask of any relationship, what will I get from this? What will this person do for me, give me, be for me? And that question, though it feels natural, is the seed of 1,000 relational failures, because a relationship built on getting is a relationship built on a foundation that will eventually collapse, since two people both focused on getting will eventually find that neither is giving enough to satisfy the other. But God is preparing you to ask a different question entirely. What will I bring to this? What can I give? How can I be a blessing, a gift, a source of life and love and goodness to another person? And a relationship built on that question, two people each focused on being a gift to the other, is a relationship built on a foundation that can last for a lifetime. Everything we have walked through in these 21 silent ways is in the end God preparing you to be a gift. The identity rooted in Him so that you bring a settled wholeness rather than a desperate emptiness. The wounds healed so that you bring health rather than hurt. The contentment learned so that you bring fullness rather than need. The desires refined, the patience built, the capacity for selfless love developed, the idols stripped away, the direction established, the voice of God learned, the community gathered, the faith strengthened, the heart revealed, the integrity formed, the timing aligned, the trust cultivated, the pruning endured, the character formed, the stewardship practiced, the approval need broken, the intimacy with God deepened. Every single one of these is God shaping you into a person who can be given as a gift to another life. He is not only preparing a person for you, He is preparing you to be a person worth receiving. This is the most beautiful reframe of the entire waiting season, and it has the power to transform the way you experience every remaining day of it. You are not only waiting to receive someone, you are being prepared to be given to someone. The work God is doing in you now is not only for your benefit, it is a gift He is preparing for a person you have not yet met. The gift of you, healed and whole and full and free, formed into someone capable of loving well, ready to bless another life rather than merely to draw life from it. And there is a strange dignity and purpose in that, even in the loneliest moments of the wait. You are becoming a gift. The silence is wrapping you. The waiting is preparing you to be given. And here is the deepest truth of all, the one that underlies every silent way we have explored. The same God who is preparing you to be a gift is Himself, the greatest gift already given. The whole pattern of preparing to be given is the very pattern of God's own love. For He so loved that He gave His own Son, poured Himself out, became Himself the gift for a world that could never have earned Him. To be prepared to be a gift to another is to be shaped into the very likeness of the God who gave Himself for you. And so the waiting, for all its ache, is making you more like Him. More giving, more loving, more whole, more ready to pour out your life in love rather than to grasp at love to fill your emptiness. That is the work of the 21 silent ways. That is what God is doing in the silence. He is making you a gift. So here we are at the end of the 21 silent ways, and I hope that the empty seat at your table looks different to you now than it did when we began. Because the silence was never empty. The silence was the workshop. Every day you have spent waiting, every quiet stretch where it seemed nothing was happening, every unanswered prayer, and every lonely evening. All of it has been the hidden labor of a God who loves you, working on a foundation you could not see, preparing you for a love you cannot yet imagine, and preparing you even more to become a person capable of giving that love well. You are not being passed over. You are being prepared. The God who set His heart to answer Daniel from the very first day, who was working through every silent hour, even while the prophet wondered if heaven had heard him at all, is the same God working in your silence now. The answer was never the question. The shaping was the answer all along. Before you go, I want to ask you to do one thing, and it is the thing I believe matters most as we close. Somewhere in the course of this teaching, a particular person came to your mind. Someone you know who is waiting too. Someone carrying the very same ache of the empty seat. Someone who needs to hear that the silence in their life is not abandonment, but preparation. I want you to send this video to that one person, not to a list, not to everyone, to the one soul who came to mind. That simple act, sending these words to someone who needs them, may be a quiet gift of love to a person walking a lonely road, a way of telling them, without saying it directly, that they are seen and they are not forgotten, and God has not gone silent on them either. Let this teaching reach them through you, and if you have not yet subscribed, I would gently invite you to do that too. It is completely free, just a single tap of the button below this video, so that the next teaching finds its way to you when it comes, and you have a steady place to return to in the seasons of waiting that are still ahead. And before you go, I would love to know, where in the world are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or your country in the comments and watch the global circle light up, name by name, place by place, believers and seekers and weary waiters from every corner of the earth, all gathered around the same words, all being prepared by the same God, all reminded that they are not alone in the waiting. Let the world see how far these words are reaching. And now, hear this blessing over you, spoken directly to the one who is waiting. May the God who works in silence be no stranger to you in yours. May you come to know the empty seat at your table not as a sign of his forgetting, but as the quiet evidence of his preparing. May he root your worth so deeply in his love that no delay can shake it, heal the wounds you have carried so that you carry them no longer, and make you, in this very season, into a gift worth the giving. May you trust his timing when you cannot trace his hand, and may you discover, long before the right person ever arrives, that you have already been found, already been known, already been loved with a love that was reaching for you before the foundations of the world. And may the peace of the God who is never absent in the silence guard your heart and quiet your longing, until the day his perfect timing is finally revealed. You are not waiting alone. You never were. God bless you, wherever in the world you are, and I will see you in the next one.